Hello, welcome back to my channel. I don't know why I'm acting like this, behaving in this way, but hello, welcome to Bookishrealm, back with another video. As you can see by the title of this one, I am asking a question. There's no, I have to point this out. I'm pointing this out because I don't want anyone to think that this is like a definitive statement. Because somebody somewhere is not going to see the question mark, they're not going to watch this video in its entirety, and then they're going to comment, and then I have to come for them in every inch of their soul. Anyway, hello, welcome back if you've already been here. Welcome if you're new. Over here at Bookishrealm, we like to do a little bit of everything, and one of my staples on this channel is discussion videos. And I'm gonna tell you how this one came about. So all of you know at this point, because I won't shut up about it, I am a very proud librarian. I love my job. I love what I do, the field of librarianship. And so, of course, naturally as part of my job, I do look at Publishers Weekly once a week, just to kind of get an idea of what's happening in the publishing world, like what new contracts have been picked up, what's releasing, new reviews that come out, and a lot of it too, definitely for like the publishing news. And it's been a couple of interesting things that have been happening, you know, in the past couple weeks. Well, with it being pretty much the middle of the year, we're a little bit past the middle of the year at this point, Publisher Weekly decided to, you know, put out their article where they list the print bestsellers in 3 categories, which is adult, children's, and young adult. So of course, out of curiosity, I'm like, I kind of think I know where this is gonna go, but I'm gonna look because I want to confirm my suspicions. Now, I dibble dabble in all age categories. If you've been here for a long time, you pretty much know there's not really much that's off limits to me. Content wise, there are some things that I'm like, I won't do it. And it's usually somewhere in the romance area for some tropes, some things that I'm kind of like, yeah, sis, I'm not finna do that. But for the most part, I kind of read across a wide spectrum. So when I looked at this list, I'm pretty much familiar with about 90% of this list. I haven't read everything on this list, but in terms of author or title recognition, I'm pretty much there. I was not surprised by what I saw. Now, I'm not gonna do like a reaction to the list because I've already looked at the list, and most of you probably won't be surprised by what's on the list anyway, but it got me thinking about this bigger picture question of, do popular books mean quality books? And that's a question that I want you all to think about and answer in the comments after you kind of hear me explain my thoughts about that question. So just to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that are on the Publisher Weekly's, you know, best-selling, and this is not just, you know, they didn't just make this up. Like, these are the best books that we did. No. This is based on print sales, January to June of this year. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them, but of course, in the adult section, you're going to see things like Spare, of course, by Prince Harry. Colleen Hoover is on this list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times out of 20 titles. Colleen Hoover has taken 8 of them. That is almost 50% of this list is Colleen Hoover. That is, I still cannot get past the fact that out of 20 print titles from the best-selling list, almost 50% of them are Colleen Hoover, but not surprising there. Taylor Jenkins Reid, Emily Henry, Lucy Score, these are people that we are pretty much, you know, familiar with via social media. The children's list might be a little bit more unfamiliar to people, only because at least via YouTube and TikTok, I see more emphasis on it. On Instagram, it's a lot of librarians and educators who are on Instagram, and so I see a lot of children's lit recommendations over there, especially because I dabble in a lot of children's lit myself. But some of these titles, of course, I was not, the only, wait, let me not lie. The only one that I was shocked about out of 10 titles, a Taylor Swift A Little Golden Book biography. I knew it came out. I didn't purchase it for our system, but I wouldn't have anticipated that being on the top 10 of the children. I just, that was a shocker. But seeing things like Dog Man, Cat Kid, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, even older titles like The Very Hungry Caterpillar, Brown Bear, because usually a lot of those are staples in libraries, communities, households, especially for early readers or for little ones. It's not that much of a shocker. With the YA also, I mean, these are not surprised. If he had been with me, that has recently, you know, blown up. all of Holly Jackson's books, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, no surprise, you know, when you have an adaptation coming out. When Lynn Painter, I know that she's had some traction. Jennifer Lynn Barnes, The Inheritance Games, that's been pretty popular. So a lot of what I'm seeing on here is the influence of social media on reading and sales. And you see this with titles that have been released a long time ago. Not so much in the children's area, I think, because of the gap in social media when it comes to children's lit. But for example, If He Had Been With Me, that book came out almost 10 years ago, and yet it is #1 for the number of units sold between January and June of this year. #1. We're not talking about a new release, something that came out in 2023. We are literally talking about a book that someone read, it resurfaced, probably went viral on TikTok, and now everybody wants to read it, and now everybody has to purchase copies. I know on my end as a librarian, I've had to purchase a lot of copies of that book in order to keep up with our holds ratio, which has been So the question is, why do we keep seeing the same books? And I think that with the consumption of social media on a different level, I feel like especially with the pandemic and lockdown, that was a form of communication between a lot of people. We couldn't interact face to face. I feel like, you know, social media was our aid. And then you have the rise of book talk. Everybody's talking about book talk. You have library displays that are popular book talk books. You have, you know, bookstores now that are tagging their books with book talk. Like, you know, it's a very fascinating phenomenon with short form content, people looking for recommendations. It is the thing now, the cool thing to be as a reader, which for me, in my mind, I'm like, goodness gracious, where was this 20 years ago when I was a kid that loved to read and it was not the cool thing to do? So this generation is getting something that's a little bit different, but I do think that we keep seeing the same books over and over again because of social media, and the type of content that keeps going viral is the content that keeps pushing these same titles over and over again. Like Colleen Hoover, for example. I made a video about Colleen Hoover. She was named as one of Time's 100 most influential individuals. I did not disagree with her being on that list. I did disagree with the tagline that Jenna Bush gave her. She's inspired a whole generation of people to read, and it's like, that's not facts, and I'm not gonna agree with that. But I do think that because of the way that she has influenced a community, that she should have been added to that list. But Colleen Hoover's been writing for years. Like years and years and years, okay? She's been writing for a while. She's not a new and upcoming author. She's not just released her first book and it's a phenomenon. No, literally she's been writing for years, and they're reprinting her books because now they're just really selling very, very well. I mean, she outsold the Bible. So there's that. It's fascinating, but I think that at the end of it all, we all know that social media does play a huge role in why we continue to see the same books on these lists, particularly in the adult and YA categories, over and over and over again. Now, to the meat of the question. Does popularity mean quality? Now, I want to preface this by saying, and I hate having to preface this, but for some people it needs to happen because it just needs to happen. This is my opinion. This is not fact. This is my opinion. I have read a good number of books off of this list, Colleen Hoover not being one of them. But this is my opinion. Opinion. We all have opinions. This is mine. I am kind of torn between the yes and a no on this question, okay? When I say no, I don't think popularity means quality, because I think sometimes that the hype gets to us all. And sometimes books really are not written that well. And they really don't have great character development, and they really don't have great plot development. But the hype, the excitement, the buzz, you read it and that plays a role. I also don't think that as a collective, what is popular, especially when I look at the young adult and the adult titles as being the best quality, collectively being the best quality of books that the market has to offer. Because if you notice the names that I was calling out, if you notice the titles that I was calling out, we are typically getting books from the same perspectives. And for me, as someone who's a huge advocate for diverse literature, I can't get behind and say, oh, this is, you know, collectively, I'm not talking about individual books, collectively, this is the best that we have to offer in the world of publishing right now. I don't think it is. I think that there are some amazing books coming out from a wide variety of voices that don't get the credit that they deserve because we're continuously hyping up the same stuff over and over again that does not collectively have the pizzazz that everyone wants to give them. I think too that it kind of tying into that, it doesn't really allow for people to expand their horizons. So what ends up happening is we have this domino effect where we are, for example, use Colleen Hoover, right? Colleen Hoover, to my knowledge, if I'm wrong, correct me, is a white cis het woman, okay? So you get people hooked on Colleen Hoover. The next thing people are looking for is, oh, what are some more books that are like Colleen Hoover? And then you kind of keep tumbling into the same perspectives over and over and over and over again. And as someone who believes in a wide variety of voices and perspectives and quality literature, I feel like that's a problem. Personally, I feel like that's a problem because I think it's always good to step outside of your comfort zone, broaden your horizons, get a perspective from something that's not necessarily like your own. And when I say that, I do not mean that you have to read about trauma-based stories. Let's go ahead and knock that out the way because that seems to be a big theme on TikTok now where like you can't read, and I'm about to get a little messy, you can't read books by Black authors because they're all trauma-based. Let's not do that because there are plenty of stories that don't have trauma written within their pages that are not collectively about oppression and racism and the difficulty about being a part of a marginalized community, that are beautiful incidental stories that people can learn from, that are not just what we see on this publishing list. And that's not to say either, because let's talk about Miss Hoover, all right? Because she knows how to write a good traumatic story. Let's just put that. I don't know why people associate anything that's not white, cis, and het as being trauma-based, but that's another discussion for another day. And if we need to have it, you can let me know in the comments down below. I also think that it doesn't allow for new voices. This is a clear-cut issue of how social media has impacted publishing so much that we don't get to really see anyone who's new rise to the top. So a lot of this is like, some people would perceive this as this is the best that publishing has to offer, and that's not true. These are not, in my opinion, I don't think that these are necessarily the best of the best. So that's why when I say popular books don't necessarily equate to the best books that have been written. Unfortunately, that's just how I view it. That's how I see it. Now, where do I say yes? Where do I say that what is so great about popular books, and are they really good books when it's all said and done? Listen, I'm like anybody else. I am a human being. The buzz and wanting to be a part of the community, the chatting and the talking and knowing what everybody's in on. It's like everyone has this inside joke when they read the same book and you're not in on it, so you want to read the book because you want to understand what everybody's talking about. It does in some ways build a sense of community. Regardless of whether you end up liking the book or not, I do feel like you do end up feeling this sense of community. I think that's what happened with Fourth Wing. Very divisive book. I feel like for most of the people that I know, you either love it or you don't. And it has brought forth a lot of interesting conversations about the book itself. I read it. I have not talked about Fourth Wing yet. I am not one of the fans. You should already know that. If you know me, 9 times out of 10, you probably understood that I was not going to be a fan of Fourth Wing. Another thing, some of them actually are good. So prior to this, I was saying collectively, and I was saying collectively for a reason, because there are some things that I have read on this list that are bestsellers print-wise that are actually good books. And so for me, they were good books. And so it's kind of a hard decision to make. That's why it's like, I'm kind of torn on the yes and the no, because I actually have read some of these and I'm like, actually that was pretty good and it actually was kind of worth the hype. And I've read some that I'm like, absolutely not. Not worth, spare. Not but I think we all collectively read that book because we just wanted to be nosy. And that's, you know, that's fine. I understand it. the positive thing too about this is that it gets people reading. And so the librarian side of me is like, well, you know, with the issue with literacy in the United States, especially post-pandemic lockdown era, it's kind of hard not to say like, dang, well, people are reading. I mean, I would prefer it if they read more broadly, but the excitement around reading as a librarian, as a content creator, I roll my eyes all the time. But the librarian side of me is kind of like, well, dang, like, I'm so excited that people are amped about books. Like, now there's much more to be said about, are people really enjoying reading, or is reading the new, I hate this word. I hate this word. The new aesthetic, or are people making reading their personality trait now? And so, but dang it, like, they're reading a book. So I just, that's a whole different conversation to have. So my answer to that question is, I think that it can be yes and no. I think when we look at it collectively, I'm more at the no end of the spectrum. But when I start going through some of these individually, it's kind of like, yeah, actually, you know, I can kind of see the hype around it. It was a good book. So for me, it's kind of looking at it from that angle, collectively versus like single. And so that's kind of where I'm at with the question. I think that one of the things that we can do to kind of shake this stuff up, although I don't know how much of this we can shake up, because I feel like there's a group of us that want to shake it up, but then the group that is content with where it is much larger and has a much larger reach. I think that what we could do personally is hold ourselves accountable for making sure that we are expanding our views, expanding perspectives that we're reading from. And like I said, I can't tell you what to read because that's not my job. You know, I'd love to do that maybe a year, 2 years ago, but at this point, I just feel like as I get older, I just don't care. I always say, like, it teaches me how to move around people at this point. Like, I can't keep having the same discussion with people. You get where I'm going with that. But I think that, you know, expanding your reading, I don't think there's anything wrong with reading hype books. Like, I never, ever, ever would be like, oh, you know. But I think that finding balance is good. You know, like, I think that finding balance is good for the sake of people. And I come at this from the angle of a content creator, because for the sake of people who are watching us, y'all, I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a comment that's like, oh, finally, somebody who's not reading what everybody else is reading. And that troubles me sometimes, because I know that people are actively looking for content creators or content in general where they're not constantly seeing Emily Henry. They're not constantly seeing Colin Hoover. Nothing wrong with reading what you want to read. But at the end of the day, I think as a content creator, my responsibility is to, you know, when people come to me for recommendations or people are coming to me to check out new stuff, I want to be able to provide them with something that maybe everybody's not necessarily talking about, because it'll give them the opportunity to dive into something maybe they've never experienced before, by also keeping that balance of joy versus trauma. And I think that if, you know, you're not a content creator as a viewer, you know, push and promote those people who are reading very, very balanced. You know, they may read the Emily Henrys and the Colin Hoovers, but, you know, they'll pick up something maybe that everyone hasn't necessarily heard of before, or less people are talking about this. And that's not, it's not a way to say like, oh, I'm better than you because I don't read as many hype books. That to me also is another, that's a whole nother conversation. But I think that giving people just a broader range, it gives us the opportunity to shake that up a little bit, you know? I don't know if that will ever happen, y'all. That's just me kind of being like hopeful and optimistic, and I'm not saying that it won't ever happen, but with the way that things trend on social media, it's kind of hard to break out of that cycle of, you know, every time Colin Hoover releases a book, it's an instantaneously, like it's a bestseller right off the jump. Or we see somebody read a book that's 10 years old and it's like, great, you know, I love a good backlist book. But out of every book that is releasing this year, we are, you know, pumping up the traditional YA toxic love story with 2 white characters that is in some way traumatic and tragic. And so that must be number 1. Like, we just have got at some point to do better. But I mean, that's basically it. I want to pose that question to you, because when I saw that list and I thought about the question, I was like, dang, I said, this is kind of a hard question. And I don't even think that I have like 100% yes or 100% no. because it's kind of hard. Like, you know, I can't sit here and say like, oh, I've never wanted to read a hype book. I just read Fourth Wing, for God's sake. And on the YA list, I've read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on hold for number 6 on that list. On the children's list, I've read about a good 5 or 6 of those. And the only reason why I haven't read a lot more of the adult list is because most of it is Colleen Hoover. And I on principle alone, I just can't. If you like it, good for you. She's just not for me. So clearly I'm not coming at this from an angle of, oh, I don't ever read hype books or popular books. And because I read books that are lesser known or don't have as many ratings or reviews on Goodreads, that's absurd, first of all, because that's not me in general, but I would never come across that way. I don't intend to come across that way, but I do think that balance is everything. Balance is everything in life. But anyway, y'all let me know your comments or your thoughts in the box below. It's just a random thought. Y'all know how these discussions go. Like, a random thought pops in and it's kind of like, well, let's kind of like work this out in front of a camera. One of these days, I'm gonna work this out in front of a camera and it ain't gonna go the way that I'm planning. I promise you that's gonna happen. But anyway, as always, I'll be back with another video soon.